I don't. It's no. We're not that far away from Thanksgiving. Every year at Thanksgiving at our house, we play Alice's Restaurant by Arlo Guthrie. About halfway through the song, he's telling stories and everything else. Then he comes around and he goes, "Hey, remember Alice? She's the one the song's about. Remember Ross Chastain? He actually won the race yesterday. You wouldn't know it. Way to go, Ross. Congratulations. Career win 4, second win this season." And he said it was a biggie.
We did something else that's never been done before. This vision for Trackhouse and what this was goals like this, and they were lofty. And it started with Advent Health and the Moose Lodge believing in me, coming over to Trackhouse. I couldn't think of anything I would want to do more is to try to be like Kevin Harvick, and racing him early in the race was bucket list, little kid in me racing that 2005 GameCube game. Yeah, I am beside myself that we were able to do that.
So there he is, Ross Chastain, second win of the year. And Brad, just wanted to work that in there a little bit because I know that you get overshadowed if you win that race and you're not the champion.
Yes, and look, yesterday's race was about the championship. There was no question about that. How many times for 3 years in a row did we not talk about Greg Biffle winning the season finale at Homestead before we had this championship format, or Denny Hamlin doing that, or someone else? But it should be celebrated. And in another similar comment, Ross had also said, we just did something for the first time again, but this time we didn't get in trouble for it. So obviously referencing the Hail Melon from last year at Martinsville. But I thought it was great. Look, they ran a heck of a race. They led nearly half the race out there, and that's what he's supposed to do. As Kyle said earlier, he's supposed to go out there and win the race. That's what Justin Mark pays him for.
Kyle, you would know this better than any of us. Does this help you at all for next year, or is this just a nice little lovely parting gift for the 2023 season?
No, listen, I think the way this season has gone for Trackhouse, they've had flashes of brilliance. If we go back to Nashville, I mean, that was just the perfect race. And even Daniel Suarez has had some stellar runs to come up in the end with nothing. And that's why this was so important. For them to lead this much of the race, to drive through the pack, to not win this race would have been a blow to them. To win this race gives them a little bit of that momentum going into the offseason and say, yes, we can run it against these guys. We make it to that championship for next year, we're good.
Going into this race, there was only one driver that had a shot at being a multi-time champion, and of course, that's Hendrick Motorsports driver of the 5-car, Kyle Larson. Kyle wound up finishing second in the championship, third overall in the race.
Even though I didn't feel like I had the fast car, I had an opportunity, so it's a bummer when you don't win. But at the same point, I'm probably coming up this close. Yeah, I'm probably more eager for the following season already. Like, I know where I need to improve, and I'm just ready to get back on the track and work on all that. So, yeah, bummed, but also eager to get into the offseason, get working, and get ready for next year.
Brad, don't you get the feeling, and I'm not trying to put words in your mouth here, that we're going to be talking about this guy being a perennial championship threat for as long as he wants to be around?
I think so, because, look, this was a checkers or wreckers season for Kyle Larson. You look at all the DNFs that he had in addition to all the race wins and all of that. And honestly, yesterday you thought that his pit crew was about to win him another championship when they got him off pit road first during that last cycle of pit stops. They just simply weren't the strongest car yesterday. But through all of this, and it's kind of amazing to see, because you think of Kyle Larson, people reference him as the best driver in the world right now. Through all of this, you see him continuing to learn, mature, and make better decisions on the racetrack. And the more he does that, the more we're going to see him in this championship race, the more we'll see him on the big stage.
Need to be aware that comparison is the thief of joy. So when you compare drivers and saying somebody's the best in the world, I'll be prepared to be disappointed. By the way, he did win 4 races this year: Richmond, Martinsville, Darlington, and the finale at Las Vegas Motor Speedway, and the All-Star race. So finishing second overall, and with 4 wins and an all-star win, a pretty all-star season for Kyle Larson. Up next, let's talk about the guy that won the most races this year. Let's hear from William Byron.
We just need more on the short tracks. We just struggled as a team on the short tracks, but we had a great season, a lot to be proud of, a lot of really solid races, communicating well as a team. So I feel like all that stuff can just go up a notch, hopefully, and just have a bit more speed at certain tracks that we know are important. We definitely, down the stretch here, it was tough. We didn't have really what we needed, but that's okay.
Of the NBC TV crew, Kyle Petty was the president, co-chair,
Yes.
I think secretary, treasurer of Team William Byron, and thought that this guy was, I'm not going to say a mortal lock, but you
Yeah.
really liked him going into yesterday.
You know, I liked him going into yesterday, and I honestly liked him more after the miserable performance they had at Martinsville, because I looked at Martinsville and I thought Martinsville was a character builder for him, because they were so bad at Martinsville, so bad. And they kept plugging, they kept working, they kept catching cautions, they kept adjusting. And yes, they finished 14th or something like that. And that's nothing stellar. But they ran 28th 90% of the day. So for me, that was a huge moral win. And he even brought that up during the week a couple of times, that they felt like they were a tighter, more cohesive team after what they had gone through at Martinsville. But they just didn't have the speed. They didn't have and I say they didn't have the speed. Let me put it this way. They didn't have the adjustments to find the speed. They were good the first leg. They were good when the sun was out. They were good at the hot part of the day. But as the racetrack changed, as it rubbered up, as it cooled off, as things happened, they didn't have the adjustability in their car.
95 laps led yesterday, Brad Gillie, and a stage 1 win. But when it all came down to it, 4th place in the race, 3rd in the championship.
Yeah, I really thought, honestly, early in that race that it was about to be the William Byron show when it came to the championship. I mean, they were doing everything right. William does such a good job about just putting his head down and racing, and all of those things were happening. But I do think he said it best. We just simply didn't have the speed on the short tracks, and that is something that Blaney did have, and especially at Phoenix Raceway. But, you know, they can leave this season with their heads held pretty high. They won some good races. They won some big races, and they have also, I feel, that momentum. Just his first championship for appearance. There'll probably be a lot more.
William Byron with a half dozen wins this year: Las Vegas, Phoenix, Darlington, Atlanta, Watkins Glen, and Texas Motor Speedway. They won on all kinds of tracks, and look for them also, along with his teammate Kyle Larson, to be a threat all the time. Christopher Bell was the 4th title contender, had a brake rotor overheat fairly early in the race, got into the wall, wound up finishing 36th. Kyle, I know you work for NBC. The graphics package they showed how that happened is absolutely great television.
Phenomenal. It was that. Yeah, listen, we've been mesmerized every time we see the graphics packages that they have come up with and that company has come up with. But Steve explained it perfect. It goes from hot to red hot to white hot. And when it goes to that point, it expands, it gets into the caliper, and it cracks the caliper and it explodes. And that's what happened. You know, and I looked at that and I thought, you know, if we go back to Saturday's race, the Gibbs cars had some brake issues. We saw Myatt Snyder have a brake issue in a Gibbs car. We heard from Chandler, from some of those guys that were running up front, and with the Gibbs cars that had brake issues. They were talking about adjusting to the rear, adjusting to the front. Even Nemechek said at one point in time he had adjusted it all to the rear, and they're like, get off of that, put it back to the front. So my point was that I'm going to blame this a little bit on Blaney too, because Blaney ran him hard there right before all that. Remember how hard those two guys raced? They raced incredibly hard because they were trying to come through the pack to get up to the front, and they ran really hard early. And Christopher Bell obviously had a mechanical failure.
So Christopher Bell winds up 36th in the finale, but a good season where he won some races. He won the dirt track race at Bristol Motor Speedway.
Yep.
He backed that up with a win at Homestead. So a nice year for C. Bell overall.